Hi, everyone. Thanks for making it. I'm sure you had a long night, those of you who were partying last night. And this might be an early morning for some of you. And we hope this gets interesting because we are talking about an interesting topic, which is mining in emerging markets, especially in South America and the Global South and Africa. And we have people on the panel here from Africa as well as South America. And I will let them introduce themselves. For me, I'm Nishant. I run a consulting firm called BlocksBridge. We advise companies in the Bitcoin mining industry on communication strategy. And on the other hand, we also have a research arm for people such as yourselves who are interested in Bitcoin mining or investing in Bitcoin mining. We do produce free research on publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies on theminermag.com.
Thank you very much. So I'm David Steinbauer from VENgard. We do Bitcoin mining at scale, deploying big infrastructures around 100 megawatts and upwards in South America. We mainly help miners from the US coming and settle down in South America. It's a very, very exciting market there, big opportunities, and we think that's the future. So that's what we do specifically. So thank you very much.
Hey, everybody. My name is Erik Hersman. I'm a part of Gridless. At Gridless, we do Bitcoin mining in East and Southern Africa, and we work with mini grids, so small energy generators in rural communities to kind of help them become more financially sustainable, and also what we do helps decentralize the Bitcoin network.
So when we talk about mining in emerging markets, a thought that often comes up is the impact that mining has in these communities, because these emerging markets are more vulnerable in some ways than communities in the first world. And so we would love to know about how you integrate or plan to integrate the communities, because I understand VENgard is still building their operations, so that you probably have plans to integrate the community. And you already have great use cases of integrating the community, involving them in your operations. We see that on Twitter and social media. I think the audience would love to hear more from you about it.
Yeah, sure. So when we deploy Bitcoin miners into a community, what happens is we're really supporting the energy producer there, right? The people who are running the mini grid. And there's a beautiful knock-on effect to that, which is most mini grids in Africa are not financially sustainable. I say most because I'm hoping that there's somebody out there who is. We have not yet talked to a mini grid operator in Africa who is financially sustainable. So we're going to these places that maybe have a run-of-river hydro site. They maybe have been running for a couple years, or maybe they're fairly new. And when we come in there, they have excess energy, so wasted energy. And you can think of these pockets of wasted energy all over Africa. And what happens is we come in, we sign on as their buyer of last resort, and we become their anchor tenant. And as their anchor tenant, we provide them full capacity for the first time of their energy. It's finally all being used. So the question is, why is it not all being used yet, right? Well, it's not being used yet because when you go and you put energy into a community who's never had it and is a lower income community too, they start with doing simple things like buying LED light bulb, which doesn't use very much power. They might go and charge their phone off of this, and that also doesn't use too much power. And it might be a few years before they buy a refrigerator or a TV. So there's years between when the power is created and when it's at full capacity. So when we come in there, we say, that's fine. Well, you can work at full capacity now as the energy producer, and we're going to take all your excess. As a community needs more, we do real-time demand leveling to reduce our demand for that power. If the rivers are low, so we're not getting as much power, we also reduce. And so we have to be pretty creative with that. And then and there's some immediate knock-on effects to the community. One of which is the power price for that community can be decreased now. Now, we don't dictate that. That's the power producer who runs the grid who makes that decision. But we've seen that happen. In Malawi, we also saw, as we came in, they weren't able to buy more power meters to turn on more households. So they were immediately able to buy 200 more power meters, put those inside of homes and get people connected to electricity for the first time. And just, there's story after story like this where you see the immediate benefits to the community. And the funny thing is, when we started this, we didn't think about it that way. We wanted to do Bitcoin mining as a business. There's a value for us to do it here, and we didn't realize until much later that we were going to have such a big impact on the electricity company locally as well as the community.
Good job, man.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I think we are, of course, at another scale. So if you think about South American energy sources, it's like unlimited, I would say. I mean, when we talk about energy sources, it's mainly hydro in Paraguay. And we talk about like 14 power plants, like 14 gigawatt of energy sources coming from one dam only. And there are a couple of dams, so there is enough energy to deploy. That's not the issue. The main thing is that, of course, when we talk about scale and when we talk about community, is that the education is not there. And when we talk about like scaling up, you need to understand that the people need to be first educated. Also, the government needs to know something about it. And also, when we deploy that farm, we need to build a lot of infrastructure. And when I say that, we are talking like $20 million for deploying an infrastructure at that scale, and that's a huge money. So usually, when we started, of course, we can raise locally. But somewhere you need to go international, and that's what we do at the moment. We kind of fundraise at that scale, mainly in Europe, because I'm German. And
just to give some context, what scale are you talking about for 20 million, for example?
So 100 megawatt site. So this site is like looking, as how big is, I mean, when we talk about 100 megawatt, it's like huge, mainly that's why we joint venture with big farms. Usually we host that. We are mainly focusing on the infrastructure part, not so much on the Bitcoin. We see us as a local player in that respect for international companies coming to Paraguay, using and leveraging on these green energy sources. And we see that this has a big impact on that. And we also see that from a regulation standpoint from first world countries, like they don't want to have these miners being so much in first world countries. And in that respect, we can get them in, and a lot of people, and we get a lot of traction from international mining companies coming to Paraguay, and which is pretty good because we see that it's only in the beginning of that huge step. And what we also have to know is that now it was a 50-year project building this dam and buying it. So Paraguay had a big debt on this dam, and they paid off a couple of months ago to Brazil. And that's pretty great. I mean, from there on, now the rules have changed a little bit in two respects. One is Paraguay is exporting 90% of its energy. So obviously, as you mentioned, the people are not consuming that much energy. Of course, in another scale, but still, even if you just look at the people, they are in the ranking of energy consumption per head. Like it's pretty low. I think in 3 or 4 last. So it's pretty low, and it definitely go up in terms of when it gets more and more. It's a third world country. When it gets more and more technologized. And that's what our mission is about. We are not only talking about crypto and Bitcoin mining, we are talking about data center infrastructure, we are talking about education in that respect, and we're talking about all these, the community getting involved in that. Of course, we need the maintenance. We don't take so much international expertise, or maybe the expertise, but not the workers.
This hydroelectric power that you're talking about, is it throughout the year or is it seasonal? Because that would change about how much of this 90% is being used otherwise without Bitcoin mining being there.
Yeah, so it's the whole year, of course. It's hydro. It's very, very stable in that respect. So we also provide 100% uptime for that. We are very good at, or we have good opportunities in that respect to provide a highly professional infrastructure. So when we talk about the energy industry, we talk about a first world country. A lot of people don't know it because it's a very specific focus on that country. And a lot of people see the country in a global context and didn't realize that there is a power plant or an hydro source, which is like, if you have ever been to Paraguay, and you cannot miss this. It's just amazing what technology has done. I mean, I remember the fact that. And
you're from Germany, right?
Yeah, I'm from Germany. And one thing about that, I remember when they built it, this power dam, they took a lot of this, the earth, the material out of that, and put it on trucks, and the trucks would, if you put one truck next to each other, you could surround the earth 2 times. So that's how much it's just to imagine that. It's crazy. It's amazing. Like, it's 14 power plants big. So this is,
I'm sure there are different challenges that come in different markets. Whether you are scaling or not scaling, there are still challenges when you enter these emerging or unexplored markets. Especially when it's a country like Africa, where the infrastructure is not even as advanced as we just talked about. What are the kind of challenges you face when you are operating in Africa, especially in terms of climate or environment?
Yeah, it differs. I'm here smiling because we can't even think about 14 gigawatts of power. That's another level to us. We're these little guppies who are working off of less than a megawatt wherever we are. Yeah, our environmental challenges are a little different. When you're off in a remote or rural community in Africa, you have different friction to the business than you would have in a larger site. So our problems are sometimes environmental in that I was showing these guys some images, and I probably should have given it to them so you could see it on the screen. But we had when the rains come, we get what's called flying ants. So these termites come out of the ground to mate. And they are attracted to light. And, somebody had left the light on in our container, and we hadn't yet put the screen on the side. So we had about 100 miners in there, and they just bug guts inside of everything, right? They just went straight into the fans. They get sucked in, and it's just like, crunk. And they're still running, but the efficiency is really low. This is, by the way, BT Miner, so What's Miners we're big fans of now. They kept running. The efficiency went down, but they kept running. And if you opened the fan on this and you looked inside, it was just full of just brown bug guts and wings, right? And so it took us 3 or 4 days to clean those out with toothbrushes and get them back in order. But it's one of the things that you have to deal with and make sure that, hey, let's make sure we have the netting up next time, before we go too far with this deployment. So that's one of them. We've had other issues too. Sometimes you have in Malawi, there's a big cyclone that came through, and that cyclone, it was really heavy actually where our site was, and in that site, fortunately, it had been built maybe 6 or 8 years ago, but it's really well done civil engineering. It's run of river, so it's water offtake and then back into the river, right? And so there's some rocks that had come into the intake a little bit, but didn't really shut it down. And we were able to kind of get that site up and going again a couple days after the cyclone had come through. the other thing is you have to be really connected with the community, right? Because when these issues happen, they're the people who are there all the time. It affects them also. We've had, our background before Bitcoin mining was in connectivity in Africa. So building the hardware, deploying the infrastructure into rural villages, into slums, into different parts. So we understand how to do infrastructure and hardware in Africa. And the incentives for different things for different people are always there. So on a power pole, we'll climb up a power pole and we'll put a long-range LTE connection into a tower that might be 4 or 5 miles away, and then another long-range Wi-Fi connection down to the power site that doesn't have any other connection. And that's where we put our miners. And one time we had set these up. We have a solar panel on top. We have a battery in it as well to power it, night and day. And 3 weeks later, power goes out in the community, and our miners go offline. We're like, what's going on? Well, sometime in the middle of the night, a guy came with a machete, cut down the power pole, stole the battery, and took off, right? And we're like, crap, it's really not easy. Like those things aren't actually hard to buy in most parts of the world, but they're a little harder when you're in rural Malawi. And so how do you get those parts and then get them put up again? We had to deal with that. And then asking the community, so the chiefs and the elders saying, hey, listen, we will not be able to be here if this kind of thing continues. So what are you going to do about it, right? It's a community thing. And they understand that. They understand that we're the business customer for the power company, just like they are, but we're a bigger business, and it allows for expansion of the grid, for all these other good things to happen. And so they sit down and they try and find out who it is, and they make sure that doesn't happen again, and we haven't had it happen again. So, those are the kind of environmental and other friction that we have in our life.
That's an interesting story because we don't hear such stories from elsewhere. Another thing that you mentioned that is very unique that I don't hear is you mentioned the chief or the elders that you speak to. Usually when we talk about Bitcoin mining in anywhere you talk about the mayor of the town. Are these elected officials, or are they chiefs by virtue of their age?
No, communities. Depends where you are in Africa, how elders and chiefs are created or given power. But in where we are in Malawi, it's something that's very organic to the community, and they vote people in their own way. And it's also recognized by the government as a position. But they're not electrical people at all. They're not energy people at all. They're just people in that community who represent that community.
And when you are forming these sites, because you have decentralized sites instead of one big site, you probably have to also deal with the local community's heads or whoever the authority is there. And it's natural for them to feel protective of their communities because they are very vulnerable in many ways, and Bitcoin is very new. So do you face any challenge there that, there's this magic internet money that people in the first world are getting rich with, and you're bringing it here, sucking their energy in a way? Do they feel protective or defensive?
Yeah, I think that lens is a very different lens than what you see from the people who are on the ground. The people on the ground are saying, listen, we need energy, we need electricity. Energy is the base layer for human progress, right? And so when you don't have it, your life gets very dark very quickly at night. Security is an issue. Education is harder. Healthcare takes longer or doesn't happen the same way. There's all these issues that come up. So when you have electricity and becomes even more affordable, that's a good thing. So we work with the power energy generator, right? And they know that we're their client. And we're riding behind them, really. But we go into the community with that energy partner and say, this is who we are, right? This is why we're here. And quite frankly, you could be doing aluminum smelting, or you could be doing Bitcoin mining, and nobody cares because you're there and you're helping them by stabilizing the grid and making sure that energy can either go further or come to them more affordably.
And Bitcoin mining is zero emissions versus other things that would.
Yeah, and where we are, if you see the sites, we're 500 meters, a kilometer away from anybody, right? At this powerhouse down by the river, right? And there's no sound. We do all of we do air cooling, and people are talking about the sound emissions. It doesn't affect anybody nobody hears that. Like the turbine is louder than the miners, right? And so it's actually a net positive for everybody. It's one of these things that's a win for us because we're making Bitcoin. It's a win for the energy provider because they're finally financially sustainable, and it's a win for the community because they either get more, cheaper, or more affordable electricity.
Man, that's awesome. That's really awesome.
So I'm glad that the government there or the local officials see the connection between Bitcoin mining and the electricity or the electrical grid being stable. Is it the same in Paraguay, or because it's a more complex system of governance or more hierarchical than the grassroots level that Erik is working with? So how do you take care of this education gap? How do you educate these officials on how this Bitcoin mining is helping the electricity grid?
Yeah, so in Paraguay, paper is very patient, right? So that's the bad part. So when we apply for like PPAs, by the way, in Paraguay, there is only one energy supplier. It's the government, or ANDE, it's called, and it's government. And when you apply for that, it might take a year, right? So that's something you have to be aware of. And also, if you have good connections, that's how everything's working there. So, of course, we need good connections, local partners in any respect, and that's how we do it usually. Of course, the regularity is something you have to be aware in Paraguay, although it's not a problem. It's just an obstacle you have to overcome somehow. As I said, paper is very patient in that respect. And so getting a PPA, getting bank accounts and all of that. So that's something to get all stuff running is kind of hard. But if you're then there, it's pretty easy. I mean, we don't have to tackle any environmental issues somehow.
No bugs getting squished.
No, it's. I mean, depending maybe on the scale, of course. I mean, as I said, we are not in a third world country in that respect. All the communities are third world, and in terms of security, we haven't mentioned that yet. But we are very, of course, secure. But I think most people do not even know in the country about mining and all that stuff. So there need to be a paradigm shift, also from the governmental standpoint. So it's still something which happens in the last month and years now. There was a lot of focus on the election. There was an election in the last weeks, and the right-wing party again was elected, which is pretty good for us in that respect because we can do whatever we want to do. And I think that's mainly also very good for Paraguay because all the other, like Brazil and Argentina, the neighbors are like more left-wing parties. So that brings a lot of traction or money investment into the country, which is obviously good. And when we talk about security, when the economy is rising, then of course, and growing, then of course the security goes up and the crime rate goes down. And when we talk about comparing it to the States, because that's a main topic a lot of people still have in their heads in the States, for example, we're talking about the same crime rate, right? So it's pretty peaceful. The country is pretty peaceful. And I remember a story when I was in a taxi and the driver asked me, I travel a lot, by the way, of course. And
living in Germany.
Living in Germany and in Spain and also, in Paraguay, of course. So he asked me, hey, what is the best country, right? And I thought, actually, it's Paraguay because they are so warm-hearted people, really, and so peaceful. You cannot really see it anywhere else in the world. So really, although of course it has no ocean. Yeah, it's not a tourist place, of course. It's actually one capital city and nothing else around, right? If you go over or drive over the bridge, it's like a third world country living in like little whatever. It's not having electricity. Some people really go on the power line and get there illegally, get their electricity. That's kind of these issues the government has to tackle. But they are of course, very happy if you purchase your bills in terms of electricity, and that's how they are also not so influential in that respect. We have like a good relation with them, and that's it, I think. And yeah.
Sounds like it's a partisan issue, just like it's becoming in the US, unfortunately. So it seems like the government is not very familiar with what Bitcoin mining is, or what they're doing. So it seems like it's going to be an issue sooner or later with more miners moving there. I know my friend here, Mike, he also operates in Paraguay with the company Pow.re. So there are quite a few miners at scale who are moving there. So sooner or later, I think it might be something that you will have to explain to the government to make sure that they don't see it as something unwanted.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the politicians in charge of that, they have a dedicated opinion about it, right? Of course they have. They informed them. At least that's what they think they are, but actually they are not. They don't see the enabling part in it, because when we think about that, we think about Bitcoin like the first move and first stage into a data center age where we need a lot of computing power, where we can enable or where Paraguay can play a big role in it because of the energy. When we talk about technology, we always talk about energy. It's the main thing. And of course, in a data center context, we always have to think of three aspects. And one is, of course, the technology, and one is the energy, and also about the latency. So, but in that respect, when we're talking about the computing power, we have big chances to be a big player because it consumes a lot of energy. That's what we're about to. So our vision is to expand over the Bitcoin layer in getting into the AI in the future. So
interesting. So that's another interesting topic here, which is getting into other HPC use cases, which can be done with the same infrastructure or similar infrastructure.
Yeah, high performance computing, HPC. Yeah.
So when you do that, what are the challenges from converting your Bitcoin mining operation to high performance computing, which can actually help get into emerging markets where sometimes governments may not see the benefit of Bitcoin yet, but they do see the benefits of HPC because they're using the same systems, WhatsApp, Facebook, or whatnot. So what are the challenges when you're moving from Bitcoin mining to HPC?
Yeah, so first we have to understand what's the main challenge. So in Paraguay, it's the capital. So the capital expenditure, you have to bring capital and educate the people, right? So that's the first thing. And we see that if we can make the model very simple, the business model very simple in that respect, like buying energy, step it down to lower, providing containers so our clients can come and bring their miners, for example, or computers, servers, whatever, later, then it's very easy to bring foreigners in and enable the country. And so the challenge is not as big as I think. Of course, we are at the moment, also Facebook is building a new fiber channel from the east to the west coast of South America. Of course, the interconnection to get the latency down is very important. But I think that's not the main thing. The main thing is that you need the foundation for everything. So, and from going from the Bitcoin mining to the AI age, I think the main thing is that we are not ready for the AI computing power. I think Apply Digital onboarded their first major client in that respect. We are very early in that respect. And we think that Paraguay is not the first who is tackling that challenge of AI, but rather doing their work on the ground and setting up the big infrastructure, going at scale, educating about data centers and stuff like that. So, and you have to know that, okay, Paraguay is kind of in the paradigm very like third world, but now coming with technology, it's always very disruptive. For example, when I come from Germany, we had like, when we talk about internet, we had like wire connections and all of that, and then evolving the internet slow and so on. That's not like Paraguay works in all the global south. Their big players come in, plug their signal, whatever. There are no wires. Also, the platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, everything is around that. They don't know anything else. Websites, they never have heard of that. Most shops don't have that. They just use Facebook and WhatsApp. So business is running through WhatsApp. That's how disrupting it is. It's kind of, a little bit different than I'm used to it, right? I come from a data center context. We build data centers in Europe, and that's how I got there, but because I thought, that, okay, energy is very cheap there. Also, by the way, you have to know that Paraguay has a big connection to Germany because we had, I think, two immigrations in the last 200 years. So due to the war and religious refugees also, and there is a big community, German communities there. Most of them are religious, but in that respect, they build up the country. So it's like karma or whatever. It's like now doing again. There are a lot of Germans building up all of that, and that's how I connect to this country. So although it's not in a religious respect, but in terms of they really trust the Germans. Germans also are in high positions, and the second or the first largest industry in the country is farming, like soya and also animals, and that's mainly German. So the country was like dust, or they call it the green hell. It's very rich in resource respect. So it has a lot of water and resources, and of course there would be enough energy to do solar and whatever, but the energy is so cheap and is getting cheaper in the future, so it doesn't make any sense to build up solar or whatever. So that's a little bit different, but the Paraguayans are very friendly and open-hearted also to foreigners, because they know they bring money, they know they build up the country, especially the Germans, and bring like wealth to the country.
Erik, is this something that you foresee yourself doing in the future, moving to HPC? Because you already have this decentralized network of data centers across the country, because you operate in a different model than what we just talked about in Paraguay. And yours is more decentralized, so that makes it more robust, or a selling point for data center, people who are looking for data center hosting.
So there's a little bit of a...
And of course, there's the ESG narrative around it too, because you are still, generating economic growth in Africa.
Let me say that there's a model by which you could do high performance compute, maybe especially on solar, which is hard to do with Bitcoin mining right now. But that's, for us, that's interesting, but we're focused on Bitcoin mining. right? Like that's the main priority for us. So we tend to go towards hydro, geothermal, maybe geothermal, we'll see. Hydro for sure. We think there's something interesting with wind and solar hybrids, depending on where you are in the continent. I think maybe what's important too for people to think about, I should have maybe given this context earlier, is you've got 1.1 billion people in the world that don't have access to electricity. So access, not affordable, nothing else, it's just access. 600 million of them are in Africa, all right? So we think about horizontal scale rather than vertical scale, because the national grids have gone about as far as they will, and the only way to push electrification further to the edges in places like Africa and different countries is by using small mini-grid power generators. And it just so happens that renewable energy is plentiful, and there's good ways to get it from these different sources in most parts of the continent. And so what's been missing and why these have been unprofitable ventures for so many decades now has been because they haven't had that anchor tendency, right? They haven't had somebody as an industrial off-taker. And that's really what Bitcoin mining brings. So the fact that it takes a lot of energy to do Bitcoin mining is a net positive. It's a good thing for electrification to be pushed to the edges in the parts of the world that need it most. And so to think of it as a bad thing, as a negative thing, is already buying into a thesis that I think is wrong, right? We have to think of it as a powerful position that allows us to work a lever that hasn't been able to be moved before. Like, it is the missing puzzle piece for electrification in emerging markets. And we also think there's something about resiliency. We are in 2 countries right now, so Kenya and Malawi. We're soon to open another site in Zambia. And we're really excited about all of those. We also like being in multiple countries because it gives us some de-risking against political, economic, whatever other types of risks that might be there. And then clustering in those countries a little bit to grow up our number of sites. So we're able to deal with the risk of uncertainty that comes with working in different countries in Africa, but also have the ability to also scale. So while we're much smaller, we feel like we have some resiliency built in, and we do have the ability to scale over time, right? So what might be 3 countries and 3 mines right now will be maybe 7 countries and 25 mines or 40 mines in the future. And that becomes really interesting all of a sudden. And all of a sudden, you're not looking at 3 megawatts total. You're looking at 25, 40 total across different countries. And that's where we hope to go in the future with Gridless.
Wow.
We only have time for one topic, and before we end, I would like to hear from you, and hopefully the audience can find it interesting as well, on financing options available if someone is venturing out into the global south or other emerging markets for Bitcoin mining. If you can just quickly summarize the financing options that are available, whether in those geographies or even from the developed world.
Well, in our parts of the world, it's there's a couple others who are doing mining in Africa. We have this a site we run called gamma.africa. So it's Green Africa Mining Alliance, and it's other miners in Africa too, so not just us. So we were fortunate enough to get some venture capital from Stillmark and Block, Jack's team, and also Factory, so energy guys as well as Bitcoin guys investing in us, but most of them from the US. We have had some other investors from our part of the world as well. But these other miners who are also trying, it's like they have to sometimes be more organic. They might start with 6, 10 miners and then make the money from that and then buy some more. And maybe they find somebody who's a friend and family to give to them, to invest in them and grow it. So there's an organic growth of Bitcoin mining that's happening in Africa.
Are institutional loans an option?
Institutional, possible, but also problematic. But there's also another spectrum side to that, which is like in Ethiopia, they have gigawatts of energy. And I know there's a number of large miners in the US who are looking at Ethiopia as well at the 100 megawatt level. That's too big. That's too big for us. Our britches are a little smaller. And but there's something interesting there where they're actually bringing in that global large Bitcoin mining financing, which I think you're much more familiar with than I am.
Yeah, you're right. So Yeah, of course, we are funding a lot with institutional investors at that scale, but also very open to anybody who's like to invest in these emerging markets. So you have to know, of course, Paraguay is an emerging market themselves. Of course, the financial market is changing, and also the energy market is the future. And I think with cheap electricity around the world at scale, and it's green, I think that's the perfect option. And we provide financial options to invest where you have fixed rates, right? So you don't have to have Bitcoin exposure at all. And that makes it very interesting for real estate investors to invest in this in these use cases, because we have two cycles running, right? The mining operators who are our clients, and on the other side, where we are more focused on and investing investments, that's something we are very interested in. So if you want to reach out to us, VENgard-consulting.com, shoot us a message. We are very happy and open.
That's VENgard, right? VENgard.
Yeah, as
cool.
you said.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your time, guys.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.